Bore da, croeso I gwasanaeth yr wythnos. Good morning and welcome to this week's assembly. This half term, our value is trust because trust makes us feel safe and happy. Hello everybody, I hope you had a lovely weekend. In this week's assembly, we're thinking about why we trust people. So get ready to pause the video and think about what are the reasons we trust different people in our lives. Why do you trust your friends, your family, your teachers? Think of some of the reasons why you do this. So get ready, pause the assembly and have a quick chat about why we trust people. Now, the weather was awful this weekend with lots of wind and rain. And actually this week's story is a bit like that as well. It's called After the Storm. And the story is all about how a group of friends trust one person. So let's find out more in this week's story. After the storm. A storm is raging outside and Percy, the park keeper, is having a sleepless night. When he gets up the following morning, Percy finds that the old oak tree has been blown down. It is a disaster for his animal friends who live there. But Percy is soon devising a plan to help his little friends find new homes. Percy the park keeper couldn't sleep. Outside his hut, a great storm was raging, with thunder and lightning and pouring rain. Percy wasn't frightened by the thunder, and he loved to watch the lightning as it lit up the whole park. He didn't even mind the rain, but there was one thing that Percy didn't like. He didn't like the wind. It blew down fences in the park and ripped branches off the trees. He didn't like it one bit. Oh dear, he sighed as he watched from the window. The wind tugged at the trees, making them creak and groan. It looks like I'm going to be very busy tomorrow. He pulled his pillow over his head and tried to get to sleep. Percy was up early in the morning. The wind had stopped and the sky was clear. Percy loaded up his wheelbarrow with all the things he would need to make repairs and clear up after the storm. Then he set off to inspect the damage. He felt happy as he took deep breaths of fresh, clean air. Perhaps the damage wouldn't be too bad after all. But unfortunately he was wrong. Something dreadful had happened. A great big oak tree that had stood by itself on top of a little hill had been blown over by the storm. The giant tree had been one of Percy's favourites for years, and now it looked very sad, lying on its side with its mass of tangly roots sticking up into the air. But it wasn't just one of Percy's favourite trees. Some of Percy's animal friends lived there too, and now their homes were wrecked. Percy hurried up to the fallen tree. The animals were gathered by the tree looking cross and unhappy. When they saw Percy, everyone started talking at once. Percy sat down with his friends and listened as they told him how the storm had brought down the great tree. "And now we have nowhere to live," said the badger. "Some of us lived in that tree and some of us lived under it, but we're now all homeless." Some of the rabbits looked close to tears and the fox was very sniffy. Percy passed him the handkerchief and the fox blew his nose. Percy stood up. "We'll just have to find you somewhere else to live," he said. "Come on everybody, jump into my wheelbarrow." The animals felt so much better that Percy was with them. They trusted him. First, he took them to the pine wood, but nobody wanted to live there. "Too dark," squeaked the mouse. "Too gloomy," said the hedgehog. So Percy took them to the shrubbery, but nobody wanted to live in the shrubbery either. "No big trees," complained the squirrels. "No big roots," moaned the rabbits. "Never mind," said Percy. "We'll try across the stream instead." Percy began to push the heavy wheelbarrow over a little bridge that crossed the stream. But as he got to the middle of the bridge, two things happened. Percy stumbled and the wheelbarrow decided to see what it would be like to be a boat. Splash! Suddenly, Percy and his friends found themselves drifting downstream to where the stream opened out into a lake. Percy stood up and looked around. "We'll have to paddle back to the shore," he said, but then something else caught his eye. "No, wait," said Percy. "Let's paddle across to the other side of the lake. I've got an idea." The animals looked puzzled. What was Percy up to? Slowly, they paddled the wheelbarrow across the lake. "Here we are," said Percy. The squirrels jumped ashore and tied up the wheelbarrow to the roots of an enormous hollow tree that grew by the water's edge. "Now this is my plan," said Percy. Everyone gathered round as Percy explained his idea. "Now is everybody clear?" Everybody nodded. "Then let's get to work." They began by unloading all Percy's tools and the planks of wood from the wheelbarrow. Then, Percy explained exactly what he wanted each one to do. He showed the badger how to use a saw, and he showed the squirrels how to knock in nails. The fox drilled holes and the rabbit screwed in screws. The mice were kept very busy fetching and carrying for everybody else. And at lunchtime, they took a short break to share some of Percy's peanut butter sandwiches. Then, they got busy once again. At long last, their work was finished. A very tired Percy stood back to admire their handiwork. Now the squirrels had a brand new home, and so did the mice. The rabbit had a new home, and so did the badger, and the fox, and the hedgehog. In fact, every one of Percy's friends had a fine new place to live in. "Well done, everybody," said Percy. "This is the best treehouse I've ever seen." "What about you, Percy?" called the badger. "Aren't you going to join us?" Percy smiled. "I think I'll stick to my old hut," he said. "Besides," said Percy, taking an acorn out of his pocket, "I shall have one job left to do back at the little hill." So earlier on, we talked about why we trust people in our lives, people like our friends, teachers, our families. So now let's think about that story. Why did the animals trust Percy? What did he do to help the animals in the story? Have a quick chat in your classes and then have a lovely rest of the day. See you all later.